Death and dying is a normal part of life, but it doesn't feel like it. Loved ones of the dying person, we've got a burden on our shoulder.
What do I do? Are they going to die now?
And what happens after that last breath? I will be responsible.
The family, I'm going to be losing this person, and that person, I'm going to be losing my life.
Let's bring this out on the table. Let's talk about this. Do I want to fight the fight? Because you can't make dying easy, but I could make it easier.
Well, I'm so happy to welcome Myra Bennett here to our podcast today of Love Lights the Way, helping to empower people on all levels, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So Myra is an end-of-life guide, I guess you could say. She has a business called Compassionate Crossings. And Myra, tell me more about yourself.
So, as you say, I'm an end-of-life guide. The term that is more familiar with most people is end-of-life doula. But there are a lot of names for what I do. I personally choose end-of-life guide because I think that resonates more with people. I began my journey in this field about 10 years ago. At that time, I had been a hospice nurse for a major national hospice, and I had done that for many years. And I just came to the realization that what I was doing was that fed my soul, that made me feel like I was most helpful, was how I was helping primarily the family and loved ones of the dying person. I was functioning as a nurse and doing all the nurse things, but what really made me feel like I was making a difference in that home was what I was doing to help the family. And so I took my proverbial nursing cap off and started Compassionate Crossings in Sacramento. So I did that. I started that process in 2013. And then a couple of years later, I started the project of my book and started writing the book on how to die well, because I was running into, as a hospice nurse and an end-of-life guide, I was running into people really struggling through the whole process of end of life. And I knew that they didn't know. I knew that they didn't know because they weren't seeking it. They were waiting for it to knock on their door. And so I felt driven to help people to do a better job of that. And so the title, Dying Made Easier, Creating Your Happy Ending, is just that. It's just like a workbook on how to do a better job at end of life. So that's how I kind of got into this field.
Wonderful. That's so great. So how do you actually work with people who are the families and the person who are in that space?
Mm-hmm. So, we all live uniquely. We all die uniquely. And every time I knock on that door, I see a different way, a different take on end of life. And so I really must make discoveries about what it is that death and dying means to them, and how are they perceiving it, and what is the unique dynamics of that household, and what are their needs. And so the way that I approach it is absolutely unique every single time that I have a client. But primarily what I'm doing is I'm helping everyone hold it all together, because although death and dying, I'll use those words, they're not great words for what's happening, but death and dying is a normal part of life, and it's right as rain. But it doesn't feel like it. It feels like an urgent situation. And so it's just a matter of helping people to get through that traumatic, sometimes, most of the time actually, traumatic thing that they're going through, and doing that uniquely based on their situation and their needs.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just being that that arm around the shoulder. I'm holding the hand. I am teaching. I do a lot of teaching on what's happening and what does this mean and is it okay? And how do I care for my mother now that she's confined to bed and those sort of things. And I'm a girl Friday. I'm a baby boomer, and that was a term used a lot of years ago. But a girl Friday really just does everything, anything, So if someone needs to go to the store or if the dog needs walking, or I'm really prepared to do whatever is necessary to just make that event happen more smoothly.
Lovely. I love that, Myra. Yeah. So if people have all different kinds of spiritual connections. So how do you work with the varieties? Because everyone has a different belief system.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be really part of your creativity, I would imagine.
Very much so. Yes, that's a very important part of what's going on. And there's just so many different ways to see that based on the person's spirituality or religion. So there can be feeling of peace with it, and there can be fear based on what they're coming into this experience with. And so it behooved me many years ago to be familiar with at least the major areas of belief. And so there's the proverbial ones that we all know about, the monotheistic Christianity and Islam and Judaism. But there's also, and Hinduism, there's also, other beliefs, Native Americans or, any number of other places on the globe. I think I heard recently that there are 200 and something religions on the planet. And so I can't know about them all, but I try to have a basic understanding of the major ones, and what I don't know, I'm open to understanding. An example would be a patient that I had as a hospice nurse. When he took his last breath, the family instructed me that it was very important that he face a certain direction. And so he was in a hospital bed, and so I moved the bed in the right direction, and then I adjusted him according to what their needs were based on their convictions. And so it is important for me to at least be able to be inquisitive and to want to know what they are going to need in those last moments. So, yeah, I feel like I'm relatively well-rounded in my understanding of those things.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So there's the spiritual component. There's also the mental, like which comes into that, like my belief that this is happening, or around loss in the emotional. The family, I'm going to be losing this person, and that person, I'm going to be losing my life as we know it here. So does that instigate any kind of thoughts inside of you as we talk about that aspect, mental or the emotional?
Yeah. I mean, we're all showing up in this moment based on what happened back there. We know that. And it's so colored by, what kind of experiences have I had? How many loved ones have I lost? And how did that go? And what did my parents teach me? What does my faith teach me? And so that's all going to show up in our emotions. It's going to show up in our words and our actions. And so it's so wonderful when I get a call and they say, Dad's been given this diagnosis, and can you come help? That might be 3 or 6 months before the person takes their last breath. I get to come in and I get to be part of the family, and I get to find those things out, what is their perception of end of life, and what colors that? And I can be so much more helpful because of that. That's ideal for me. However, I would have to say that more times than not, they don't think about calling Myra in to help until it feels like an emergency. And then, no one's on their A game at that point. And there's no time to talk about, why do you feel that way? Asking questions and those sort of things. So that's more time than not that we're down to the wire, and I don't have all those answers, and I'm not quite sure that I understand why they're addressing it the way they are, and so it makes it more difficult. But my MO, so to speak, is to be a calming force, and I can be that. I can. I have a gift of being able to calm people and help them to understand that things are going to be okay. And if they're not, then what do we do to make it okay? And my years of being a hospice nurse, I know when things aren't going as well as we will want them to go. And I know what to do about that. And so that's comforting. The old saying, knowledge is comfort. Mm-hmm. So, that's one of the things I bring into the family and the household, is that I have years of experience of what does it look like when it's going well, and what does it look like when we need some more help.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can imagine you calming people because your voice is very calming, and you're very kind of matter of fact, and this is how it is. And plus your years of experience, I would think, would help a lot to create a calming atmosphere. But I think it's your nature.
It's my nature, yes. Uh-huh. Yes, this is how I roll. It is my nature.
That's so cool, Myra. Yeah. So then there's the physical part, and people get alarmed, like, oh, they need more pain meds, or wow, they're hallucinating, or I don't understand what's happening, or should we go to the hospital? There could be an awful lot of interjections around the physical because people are feeling emotional, scared. What do I do? Are they going to die now? Wow. Right. So how do you help them with the physical pieces? Because that's very nursing. That's modern medicine. Mm-hmm. And so it seems like you need a lot of information about where they are, though, from your experience of over the years, you would already know a lot, even though this is an individual. So this person has their own style of what they're going through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's symptoms that I look for. So, I can gauge it somewhat, where we're at on the timeline and such. So if I see a certain symptom, and I can share that, with the family. But, again, knowledge is so comforting, just to know that this is what we expect to see. And if they are receiving hospice services, which I certainly hope that they do, and I encourage it, they are going to get a lot of knowledge from hospice, because they're very good about they give out information about what should you expect to see and what kind of physical changes are happening. And so they have that material. I reiterate it because, again, they feel like they're in an urgent emergency situation and things just aren't getting through as much as it would otherwise. And so I just go over that information with them. Mom's breathing pattern has changed because, those sort of things. But then also, years of being a hospice nurse, my skills are very good at care, physical care, bed care, So I know what to do to help that person be comfortable, where to put those pillows and how high should the head go and what other things can we do to contribute to the comfort of that person. And I always know that we loved ones of the dying person, we've got a burden on our shoulder. We have risen our hand and said, I will be responsible. I will be responsible for my father getting good care. And so it's very, I would say, vitally important that that person is comfortable. And so I spend a lot of time helping them to understand how can we make sure that their loved one is being cared for and is comfortable, and what can we do to improve that. And so, and teaching bed care, I've done it for so many years. I no longer give care. That's not part of what I do as an end-of-life guide, but I teach it and I assist with it so I can make sure that their physical needs are being taken care of.
Beautiful. That's great. So the end of life brings in a lot of fear for people, the dying person and the family or the friends. So do you have ways that you help them with their fear alongside of the other things you've talked about? I mean, you're very comforting and you're very calming and you give knowledge. Do you give techniques or do you have other ideas about this? Or do you talk to them about their fear directly?
What I find is that the person, whether it be the dying person or the loved one, they are even fearful of talking about fear, so I often have to open that door. But what I have found is when I ask those questions, what I'm doing in essence is I'm inviting them to, let's bring this out on the table. Let's talk about this. Let's, the proverbial elephant in the room. Let's address this elephant, because then we can get somewhere with it. And I would say the work that I do to help people around in this arena is my ability to be helpful. My greatest enemy is fear. That is what keeps me from penetrating and going deep into what is it that you're experiencing. Tell me more about your feelings and your emotions. It is that fear, So I would always want to open that conversation up if they allow for it, and talk about where is this coming from. Tell me more about your past experiences. Tell me more about your beliefs or convictions about what is happening and what happens after that last breath. That's also very important. So I want to be the receiving ear of that. And I find that just having that conversation can alleviate some of that fear.
I feel that, yeah. I find the same thing in my work because I'm a therapist. So fear is a big one. It's a big one. So switching gears slightly, you say that doing your advanced healthcare directive at your attorney's office is not a great idea. So how are you feeling that?
Yes. So I say that because, first of all, let me say that that's one of the things that I provide in the community is I help with creating advanced healthcare directives. I am very good at that. And the reason why is because I know what the possibilities are as far as end-of-life healthcare decisions. So I take it deeper than CPR, and that's when people think about, well, what kind of choices might I make about end-of-life care? The first thing they think of is CPR, but it goes beyond that. There's so much more than just that decision. So when you go to your attorney, that person is going to know law well, and that's the place to go to do a very good will and trust. And if you've got a good attorney, you're going to get a good product from that.
Mm-hmm.
But that attorney knows very little about the possibilities of care,
Mm-hmm.
medical care at end of life. So they can't really advise you about that. You're going to get a pretty generic form. More than likely, you're going to have some lines to fill in. But how are you going to know what to fill those lines with? That attorney's not going to be able to advise you. So I would say your best way to design a directive that has meat, that old Wendy's commercial, where's the beef?
Mm-hmm.
The beef is in filling that out completely and addressing things like, if I am in a coma and not expected to wake up, do I want artificial nutrition and hydration? It's those sort of questions that you're going to want to take a look at, because it may very well matter. Not only that, I often say that a directive is really for many more people than just the one writing it. Because if you have a good directive and something happens and your agent on that directive knows what your wishes are, that's taking the burden off of that person and the whole family, because they're not needing to guess how they should move forward. You're telling them what you would like them to do. So I think just if you don't have someone in your community like myself that would be able to direct that, just do a lot of research. Just expose yourself to what are the possibilities of end of life medical care, and what are the circumstances and those sort of things.
Beautiful. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And then there's the question of payment or end of life care. Like you mentioned, hospice is covered for most people because they're paid for by health insurance or Medicare. And so you would have a question to these people. Is this a covered benefit for you, to save them another headache down the road? Yes.
Oh, you're talking about say that in a different way.
Hospice is a covered benefit.
Yeah. But how
for most people, because the services are paid for by personal health insurance or Medicare. And so you might say, is your service a covered benefit?
I see. So at end of life, in whatever the circumstance it is it a covered benefit? I see what you're saying. Yeah. So that depends on the insurance that you have. So an example would be maybe an auto accident, for example. Do you have coverage for that? I would hope that you would, because even the ride in the ambulance is like $5,000 these days,
Oh, yeah.
So that would be important, absolutely, to think about, your coverage. There is a concern about, I've heard a lot of people say that they would not want care if it were a financial burden on their family. And so that's a good point that you make. That's something to consider when you're making your directive. And there's several different types of directives, so you can choose which one that you prefer. But some of them have that verbiage. I do not want care if it presents a financial burden to my family, and those sort of things. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in your book, Dying Made Easier, Creating Your Happy Ending, you say that less aggressive treatment for a terminal condition can be a good response. So a lot of people want to fight against what's happening to them. Why would somebody say, no, I don't want to?
So that's a good question. I always push back on that word fight. And the reason that I do is because what are you fighting? So first of all, I'll say something kind of shocking to people. if you have cancer, it's yours. It belongs to you. It is part of your body. It is not a foreign invasion. Your body made it. So when we think about fighting something that we made, that seems strange, right? But even taking that further, my doctor said to me recently, cancer is a disease of the aging. And why she said that was because if we live long enough, our odds of getting cancer is pretty great. Now, how does cancer happen? There's a lot of different ways. But one of the ways that cancer happens is it's a failure of our immune system. Our body has, for whatever reason, not challenged it. Mm-hmm. They say that most of us will grow our own cancer cells at some point in our life. But the difference between the person who gets the diagnosis and the person that may never even know they've had cancer cells in their body is about their immune system. So you're 85 and your immune system has aged as everything else in your body has. We see, when we look in the mirror, we see these wrinkles. We see signs that we are aging. Inside of us, we're not able to see those things as we're not aware of them as much. And so cancer is where our immune system has aged. It's not as healthy as it was, and it allows for that growth. So then we ask the question, well, where are we at in our life? I mean, we're 85. I'm just making up a scenario here. Mm-hmm. I can no longer walk. I'm wheelchair bound. I may have a lot of pain from maybe arthritis or something like that. The doctor says that I may not make it through surgery, so that may not be an option. They may offer me chemotherapy, but again, that can be very harsh on the body. Do I want to fight the fight? Or do I want to say, I'm done. I've lived my life. I'm ready, And so I think that there are plenty of scenarios where the person, given the circumstances, may give consideration to getting the most out of what they have left, as opposed to some scenario that looks like harsh effects of poisonous chemicals in an attempt to kill something that then makes the quality of life go away. And so it becomes this situation where there's just more. There's a saying, sometimes in our effort to prolong living, we're really prolonging our dying. And so sometimes that's what happens. We prolong our dying process. We make it more difficult. We may even suffer more rather than to say, I'm going to get the most that I can get out of whatever I have left. I'm going to enjoy my family and all those things that I love, hopefully with a clear mind, with some degree of wellness as I'm getting near the end. So, so it can be a better choice. Sounds crazy, but it can be a better choice.
No, I feel you. So you're around a lot of people who are going through grief. Do you do some work with them around their grief?
Yes, but I will always present a disclaimer and say that is not my expertise. Actually, where my knowledge is right up to that last breath. And I'm very knowledgeable in everything up to that last breath. And beyond that, not so much. But what I can offer is from my own perspective and what I have experienced with grief. I go into it in my book, but I became a widow at 48 years old. Some years later, I was engaged and my fiance suddenly died. I've lost parents and siblings and friends, and some of them were pretty young. So I have a lot of experience at grieving. And so I can share my experience with grieving and my understanding of what it is and share some stories sometimes that can help people to realize that they're not alone. And I think a big part of grieving is we often feel that we're alone and no one can understand us.
So true. So true. That seems to be an issue with people all everywhere, not just about dying people, but just being alone. I'm also wondering if you know about afterlife kinds of activities for people after, like when somebody has died. Do you help them with the family with the next step?
Yes. Again, I have a disclaimer that this is not my field of expertise. However, I've been in the field for so long that, I do know, and I stay current with what is happening in that arena. And I call that, and I made it up myself. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody use the expression, but I call it afterlife services. So afterlife services can be your proverbial funeral, or it can be, everyone knows about cremation these days. But there are so many things coming up. I mean, people are getting very creative as far as options are concerned. You can have what's called a flameless cremation, and that's where they use a solution. They put the remains in. After a period of time, there is some remaining, but it's like bones, not much. The family can do whatever they wish with that. There's composting, so the remains can go be composted. That takes time, but then the family can come pick that up and, as an example, maybe use it in their gardening or their a piece of land that the person loved, or whatever the case may be. So if they're interested in those sort of, I would say, alternative kind of methods, then I can help them explore what their options are. And there's just some wonderful, meaningful things that people are doing. They're making jewelry out of the cremation remains these days, and so you can wear a necklace that reminds you of your loved one and those sort of things. So to me, that's exciting.
That's very cool. And I hear of people all the time like, yep, Dad's sitting up on the shelf and we're not sure where to put him. Like people like to, we're going to go out to the ocean, or we're going to go to this tree or something like that. So are there any rules or things about that, or is that just whatever works? There
are. And in fact, if you decide that you would like to, as an example, take your loved one's cremation remains somewhere, you have to specify when you're doing all the paperwork for the death certificate, and it has to indicate. I know with my husband, who died in 2001, he had purchased a, I think they call them a niche. Yeah, a niche. It's like a little drawer next to his parents. And so his mother wanted part of the remains to go next to where she would eventually be. But my husband had wanted his ashes to be spread at sea. So we, fortunately, my husband's cousin has a boat and took us out. I think it's like 3 nautical miles you have to be out. And the reason for that is because if it's closer to the shore, those ashes can then wash up and create ecological problems.
Oh.
Also true with people think that they can just take the ashes and just dump them somewhere by a beautiful tree, as an example. But actually, if you put all of the ashes in one area, you actually change the makeup of the soil in that area and can impact the life forms in that area. So there's a way to spread ashes, and we don't think about that, but spreading it in a bigger area is better ecologically than in one place, so there's stuff to know about all of that. And so, if you're inclined to go one way or another, it's really a good idea to get information about it before you make that decision.
Yeah.
Another good choice is one that I have personally made, and that is that I have donated my body to education. And so it will go to university so that students can learn from my body. And then the organization has a year to take it to maybe even more than one university. But then at that point, the remains get cremated and the ashes get sent to my next of kin. That is 100% cost-free. So it's convenient, it's cost-free, so it's something to take a look at also. So I like to discuss possibilities as far as afterlife.
Yeah, that's very
services.
Cool. That's what
care.
My dad did. He donated his body to, I forget which organization, and they had it for a year, and then they sent the ashes back to us.
So nice.
I know.
In fact, I think UC Davis has a program. I chose another, the company's name is MedCure. I chose simply because there was something at UC Davis that I wasn't quite comfortable with, but there's options. So
that's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, you also say that you don't quite believe in death. So what do you mean? Death is not possible?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we're really challenged as far as human communication. I mean, you can take a word and you can define it in English and define it in Arabic, and you're going to get a different definition. So considering that, and then also considering, and let me go further with that, though. I think in Arabic, the word that they use is, the definition for it is elsewhere, somewhere else. So their understanding is that when this thing, death, occurs, it's simply a matter of that person being somewhere else. So I find that interesting. But thinking about quantum physics and that's way above my head, let me say. I don't thoroughly understand it, but some of the things that quantum physics has brought to light with humanity is that everything is alive. At the subatomic level, everything is vibrational energy. And that doesn't change, So I think in my book, I use the scenario of, the tree in the springtime creates the leaf, and the leaf prospers and blows in the wind. And then when the fall comes, the tree lets the leaf fall, lets go of it. It hits the soil. It disintegrates. It becomes part of the soil. It feeds the soil. Then the soil feeds the seeds, and the seeds grow into the plants, and the animals eat the plants. And so where is the leaf? I mean, if you look the word death up in the dictionary, it's going to say it no longer exists. And That's not true. There's never anything that's ever been on the planet that isn't still right here. And so, no, I don't believe in death. I'm absolutely sure that it doesn't occur. And I'll take that a little bit further and say that if we know that it's not possible for death to be a reality, then it's not a far cry for us to believe that that part of us, that eternal part of us, never dies as well. So, and for me, that is very comforting. And it's not to say that I know with absolute conviction what happens when that last breath is taken, but it presents an opportunity for maybe.
Well, now you're talking my story. Because this is the stuff I do all the time with the meditations that I do and working with. You'd be surprised how many people are so super sensitive. They feel things besides with their five senses. And the more and more I work with people, the more and more they're like, yeah, I had this sense and this, but I didn't want to tell anybody. They'd think I was crazy. So I'm like, well, tell me. I don't think you're crazy. I may be crazier than you. Who knows, you know? And so we talk about those kinds of alternative ideas. Like you're talking quantum physics. I love that stuff.
Yes.
And I love the documentary. They talked about Niels Bohr and Einstein. They had an argument, and Niels Bohr said there's quantum entanglement. And Einstein said, no, there's not. And then eventually the scientists were able to prove that, yes, there is, which means that when you think, say, do something, wherever you are, that it instantly has an effect on everything else in the universe or maybe beyond. So that when you're talking about the leaf and its cycle, it's the same idea. It's similar.
Yes.
Or the quantum level, if you get down in there. So
yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, I love that stuff. And I feel like, you know, the meditations that I do or I lead, they take us into other realms. And I'm the reporter. I just tell people, this is what I'm feeling. You're going to have your own experience. It doesn't have to be connected to me at all, but it seems to really help people. And the way you're talking about all your experience and you help people to calm down and all that, it seems pretty universal with the meditations that I lead, that most people feel really calm after. That's like the most common comment. Mm-hmm. Like today, we did one earlier and people were just like, oh, they were just feeling like they didn't have a lot to say. A lot of times we'll comment after, what did you feel? Blah, blah, blah. And people were like, oh, I feel so rested. I feel so good. So
yeah, it's that connection, and it's how those things affect our physical being. It seems miraculous, but if you just take a couple of minutes and do some breathing exercise, you literally bring your blood pressure down. It's verifiable. I mean, you can take a blood pressure of a person before they do even a 2-minute meditation or a 5-minute breathing exercise, and then take the blood pressure again, and you're going to get a different number. And so this stuff is real. And, I often go back to, science tells us that we have this number of senses. We see, we hear, this is what they've identified. It doesn't mean that we're limited to those. It just means that science hasn't figured it out yet. And so, we have other ways to bring in, and that's the way I see our senses, is we have them in order to allow life into us so that we can interpret it. But it's not limited to that. My eyes has brought this in, so I'm interpreting it as a car. It's not that there's necessarily a limit to that. It's just that we aren't sure how to define it or how to name it or even to understand it better.
Yes.
We talk about the brain versus the mind. And so then the question is where is the mind? Where do you locate the mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, might the mind be, and this is something that I've thought about, might the mind be something that is a shared way to bring in life,
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
About mind.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Well, yeah, that we all agree we're looking at a lamp. We're looking at a flower. This is our mindset, sort of like, that's very interesting. Well, yeah, you get back into the quantum physics, and when you'll find it with science, and you're talking about the 5 senses and the science definition. But if you find some really cool scientists who will admit, we think there's more, but we just don't have the measurements. We don't have the tools yet. And then they discover them. To me, that's so exciting.
So exciting.
When they figure it out, it's like, oh.
Right.
And they get so excited, like taking a picture of a black hole. This is off topic a little, but not so much.
Not so much.
And a black hole. And then all these guys, this one document, all these guys got together all over the world. And at one time took a picture at the same time. And they all they had worked for years and years to get this right. And then they collaborated with their data and then they all came up. It was all in sync and they were so excited. It's like, here's our first picture of a black hole. And then everybody thought, oh, black hole. Yeah, nothing comes out. We don't even know what goes in. But then like Stephen Hawking and his little team go, I'm not so sure. So then they start doing their mathematics, their pages and pages of figures that I would be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then they come up with, oh, yeah, through math, Stephen Hawking had an idea here. Yeah, around the edge of the black hole, there's these things they call the threads or the pair, and that they think all the information is stored in the hair around the edge of the black hole. So now their job is to like figure out how to download that. But and it's so cool. I don't know that they get into this stuff and they work for years and years and years and they don't get anywhere, but they're just in devoted to it.
Oh,
I love that.
How exciting must that be, right? Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And there was a time when I think scientists said, if you can't prove it in a lab, it's not real.
Right.
But they know now that there's just so much more to life. And it's just our limits. We haven't been able to identify it or understand it or name it or whatever it is. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't, and we can get into the really, interesting topics of things like angels, beings that are in our presence that once lived in form and, those sort of things. Because we haven't figured out a way to prove it in a lab doesn't mean that it doesn't exist,
Exactly.
So still going back to that, staying open to maybe,
Maybe and other senses that we have and we can develop.
Absolutely.
Because like with, I've grown my intuition, if you want to call it that, from my clients doing therapy over the years. Because I would get this sense, I would think, about this person. I'm like, I don't know. And then I would say, well, I'm getting this funny feeling about this. And they would go, yeah, that's right. And over time, they would confirm what I was feeling. And so my own confidence in my sense, whatever sense that is, you can name it, grew. And it just kept expanding. And I kept opening to more possibilities. And we can define them because it seems like humans need to define things. We need to separate things. This 3-dimensional world, we do a lot with separation and definition. And even if on the quantum level, like you're saying, everything's all together, and just different forms of, but isn't that interesting? The different forms, that's so exciting.
So exciting.
The diversity, Like, you have a blouse with flowers. I have flowers over there. I have a thing here. We got a couch. Oh my gosh, it's just unlimited. It's fun.
It really is. And, to hear you talk about the gifts that you have received in giving, you're in your field, you are a giver. I mean, this is your gift that you are giving, right? But you are receiving. And, we do live in a reciprocal universe. And so, this is what the gifts that you have gotten have allowed you to fine tune your intuition. And wow, that's so joyous to even think about that,
I know. And then you get to say, you've got it too. It's not rocket science. It's just maybe you never believed, maybe nobody ever supported you. Maybe you thought you were whatever it was. But I don't think it's weird. I think it's less universal.
Yeah.
It's just like if you begin to explore that part of yourself, if you want to, you always have a choice.
How much attention you pay to it. Yeah.
Right. So with my work as a therapist with people like all the time for 30-something years, I'm always tuned into this person. And like I was telling my women's group recently, how I listen is kind of with my body. I don't listen with the head. And this has developed over years, right, too. So I listen with my gut and the rest of me. And I'm taking in information. I'm not absorbing it into me because it isn't my life, it's their life. And I've learned more how to do that. But so I remember things pretty well because it's not up here. It's here, it translates up to here, but it's more I get the sense. So if I'm sitting with somebody that I haven't seen in a few years and they come back to visit, I can go back in most cases to the scene that we left off because there's some kind of body memory in me that picks up. They start talking about things. Oh yeah, I remember all those details. Oh yeah. So to me, in a way, that's kind of living. It's almost living on the quantum level in some sort of way because you're taking in all this information. You're not attached to it, but then something triggers you to be back in that space, and it's almost like traveling into different dimensions of, oh yeah, I remember when you went to Florida and you visited your aunt, and oh yeah, I remember that scene. I don't know. This may be fuzzy and vague how I'm explaining it, but
no, I understand perfectly. It's a matter of, like we were just saying, it's a matter of what you put your attention to. And, it's like going to the gym and, you do that repetitive and you're going to build that muscle, So, you're practicing that has brought you to an ability that others who have not made that choice, have that. But it's theirs should they ever want to. It's for all of us. So,
yes.
Yeah.
It's like what draws you? What's interesting to you?
Right.
And the so-called death, which doesn't exist, area has been interesting to you. And you've been in that caregiving nursing role for a long time. Like how many years have you been doing this?
20-ish, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I was, when I got into hospice nursing, I think I had been a nurse for like 30 years or something like that. And then at that point, I had already lost my husband and my fiance. And I felt like the universe was calling me towards that. And so, so I got into hospice nursing, and of all of the different types of nursing that I had done in my career, and I had done several, it really, fed my soul.
Wonderful.
I felt like I had come home,
That's so good.
Yeah. So I knew that I really felt absolutely positive that everything that had happened in my life was for that purpose. I know that sounds crazy, that I would lose my husband for that purpose, but it's much more deep than that. It's not that simple of a statement. But I think that all of us, that's not only true for me, that's true for all of us, that, we have this thing, this life, and it's our journey, and we get prepared as we go. And things in my life, they were happening to prepare me to do this work that I feel so compelled to do now, so sure that it is the reason why I'm here.
I love that, Myra. That's so funny. We have parallels because I was a nurse for a while. I was an RN and worked in hospitals and things like that. And I got bored. And I put all this in my book. I'm doing a little plug right now. Here's my book.
And I've read your book, and I'm familiar with the fact that you were a nurse before you were, you had gotten into this field. And do you feel also that these things prepared you for these next steps? Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I was a massage therapist before I was a nurse. Then I'm like, okay, now I'm a nurse. I was bored. I'm like, what do I do now? And then I write this in the book too. In a period of 5 days, 3 independent people said to me, I think you'd be a good counselor. And I said, oh, really? And then that same week, I saw a little ad for an orientation for a master's program in counseling for USF, University of San Francisco. I thought, oh, I guess I'll go. So I went and I thought, oh, sounds good. And I signed up and here we are. 30 whatever years later. It's similar because you were a nurse and then you got more into this end of life guide energy. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Yeah. It's so cool. I mean, I like this, but this also has propelled me into more of my spiritual journey. My clients have really helped me with that by just showing up and being who they are. And I have most of my clients show up now who are interested in their own spirituality. So I meet them where they're at, and I want to support them in pursuing that part of them that's their passion. What are you doing? Are you not? A lot of them say, I'm not really doing anything. And why not? Well, so we work with it to help them kind of find out, who am I? Where am I? A lot of people are like, I don't know who I am. And different reasons for that. I don't have to go into a lot of detail, but what it's like you said, what pulls you, what calls you, what's your passion, and what feels so good to be doing. And you found this thing is so good. So Myra's book is called, what is it called? Dying Made Easier.
Dying Made Easier. Yeah. ER is in parentheses. Because you can't make dying easy. It's just, it's not something that we humans see as easy. Dying is, it's a form of loss, and we humans, we lose. I mean, we lose jobs, we lose marriages, we lose so many things in life, and it's such a challenge for us. We even when we try, we don't really get that good at losing things. We don't want to. We reject it, and so dying made easier. I knew that I would never be able to make dying easy, but I could make it easier. And I think that the book does a good job with helping people learn how to make it easier, And then the subtitle of that is Creating Your Happy Ending. And the reason why that was so important to me was because I realized from conversations with people that they didn't realize that they had power over that last chapter. They felt like they would be helpless to whatever that would be. And so the book helps the reader to understand that you really do. You speak of having empowerment. That is an opportunity for your own empowerment. And that is to know that it really can be what is sacred to you and what is sacred to your family and your loved ones. And so you can literally create that beautiful, sacred event we call dying into something that can be joyous. It can be happy. I mean, there can be moments of laughter. And I mean, when we think of death and dying, we don't think of that as even being a possibility. But I tell you, it is. It
Yes.
is. I mean, I have
Yes.
seen where people have had intentional dying experiences that their loved ones speak of years and years later of being a happy event. You know,
Beautiful. That's
it is
beautiful.
possible.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yes.
I think so too. Myra, it's been just a joy to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I've really
appreciate
enjoyed
you.
this conversation. Yes.
Me too. So we're going to have like links to how to get a hold of Myra. She's got her email, myraguide.cc. Is that correct?
myraguide.cc at gmail.com.
Okay.
Yes. And then I have my website, which is compassionatecrossings.net. So yeah,
Okay.
the book is on Amazon, so you can take a look at that if you want to. So
Dying Made Easier. Yes. Wonderful.
thank you so much, Anne.
I appreciate you being here. Yay.